Hello, beautiful friends. I am Laurel Bleadon-Maffei with Illuminating Souls, welcoming you to Sleepy Bedtime Blessings, a podcast designed to help you rest, relax, and fall asleep, all while deepening in your connection with your beautiful team of angels who love you so. If we're meeting for the first time, I am an angelic practitioner, a spiritual teacher, and an encourager of souls. And I do this through one-on-one angel sessions, which are wonderful. And if you're new to the idea of angel sessions, I will share with you a little bit about what they are like. We meet over the phone. They're an hour long. And they're really meant to be a conversation in consciousness that helps you deepen in your connection with your divine guidance, with your team of angels, with the wisdom of your soul, and so much more. So I start with an opening prayer. I always love and appreciate the opportunity to say a prayer out loud. And I draw some angel cards, and then we begin wherever you want to start, and we explore, and I channel messages for you. They're quite lovely, and you can learn more on my website, illuminatingsouls.com. I also offer soul mentoring, which provides for consistent support as you move through a time of growth or change in your life. And I also offer a variety of classes designed to inspire your spirit. You can learn all about it at my website, illuminatingsouls.com. I also have a wonderful email blast called the Daily Inspiration Email Blast, where I will email you an inspiring message every weekday, and you can sign up for that at my website as well. But for now, right now, the angels and I are here to help you rest and relax and fall asleep. I am broadcasting to you from my blanket fort in Vallejo, California. Vallejo is in the Bay Area, about 20 miles from Napa and about 20 miles from Berkeley. So, give you a sense of where I am as I record this message for you. It looks like we have an audience that is global, so wherever you are right now, I send you love. And I am so grateful that you have found your way here. It's my experience that listening to podcasts is a deeply intimate journey. And I appreciate you spending this time with me and allowing me the opportunity to bring you love and sweetness and encouragement. So my intention is that this is a sacred, loving space for you, one that you can build a relationship with, because this sacred space does not belong to me. It is created by all of us. So this space is yours. So I invite you to take a deep breath in and allow yourself to receive the love that is here for you. It's a beautiful thing about these energies is they are so generous. And somehow energy adapts to where we are. So wherever you are in this moment, the angels are with you, bringing you love and comfort and goodness. And I was contemplating as I was getting ready for this episode to talk a little bit about what it is to read out loud, to share out loud. The throat chakra is so powerful, and we have such a complex consciousness, and most of our consciousness dwells in the unspoken world. It dwells in thoughts and memories and vibration. And it is quite an extraordinary thing to bring our thoughts, our consciousness, and our energy into spoken word. I think it's one of the reasons that bedtime stories or gathering around the fire and listening to a storyteller seems to be present in anthropological history throughout the time of mankind. One of my profound awarenesses of speaking out loud happened while I was a student at the University of Santa Monica. And if you've been listening to this podcast or you've taken my classes, you know that many roads lead back to my experience as a student there. But it's because it was so formative and I learned so much from it. So the first weekend of class, they had us attuned to an affirmation that we would use throughout the year. And at that point, I was really in love with writing, and I wrote in big flowery words. And why use one word if 10 will do? And I've shared this affirmation with you before, but I'll share it again. So the affirmation that I attuned to is, I am experiencing joyful and radiant self-love. And I am loving me. And I am trusting in my knowingness and in my magnificence. And I am enthusiastically listening to the magic in my soul as it leads me on this beautiful journey as Laurel. And I remember as I birthed this affirmation, it felt so vibrant. But something really remarkable happened when I would say it out loud, because I seem to recall that there was an exercise where they had us share our affirmations out loud with each other so we could start to feel the energy of them. And I found that when I said the affirmation out loud, something started shifting in my body and my consciousness. One of the things they would say is, a good affirmation only needs to feel 50% believable. So at the time that this affirmation came forward for me, I was really struggling with self-love. There's a beautiful lyric in a song by the singer David Wilcox, and it says, there's a break in the cup that holds love inside of me. And that had so deeply resonated with me because I could love myself when other people loved me. But when that love was removed, or I perceived it was no longer there, I would feel deflated. And I had had a very contentious relationship with myself. So this idea that I could open to experiencing joyful and radiant self-love was just such a beautiful prayer. It wasn't just I am experiencing self-love. That had no juice for me. That would be like self-acceptance. It's like, a consolation prize. Yeah, I accept myself. But to experience joyful and radiant self-love, well, that felt like a lottery ticket, a winning lottery ticket, right? And one of the things I learned was that if I would open up to the energy of that affirmation and pretend it was true, to say the affirmation out loud, not just like repeating a line of poetry with no feeling. I am experiencing joyful and radiant self-love, and I am loving me. There's no juice in that. But if I would, sit up straight or stand up straight where, however my body was oriented, and I would bring that prayer, that energy into my body and spirit. And if I would claim that out loud as truth, something shifted. And I'm not going to say it that way right now because we're trying to be sleepy. But if you can just imagine, that way of claiming, I am experiencing joyful and radiant self-love. And I am loving me. And I am trusting in my knowingness and in my magnificence. And I am enthusiastically listening to the magic in my soul as it leads me on this beautiful journey. And so I would say this affirmation out loud like 3 times a day. I might say it in the morning in my shower. I might say it driving in my car on my way to my work. I would say it when I was walking or hiking. And something started shifting, and I began to recognize the power of speaking out loud our truth. And then I would learn the power of affirmative prayer, which is remarkable. If you ever go to a Center for Spiritual Living, Agape Spiritual Center in Los Angeles, they do a lot of affirmative prayer. It's like a declaration, like right now where I am, God is, and all is well. And I affirm that the breath of God is the breath that flows through me, and it goes on, and there is this vibrancy and this build of energy that happens. So this is what I was guided to share with you in this episode, the power of the spoken word. And I really support you in exploring your own voice. It can be as simple as picking one of your favorite books and reading it out loud for yourself. There's something that happens when we hear the words and we speak the words, and the syllables flow off our tongue into the world. I've really come to love reading out loud for you. Especially we've been reading Anne of Green Gables. And it's one thing to read a book, just quietly, silently to yourself, as we so often do. But I have discovered that there's this revelation when I read a book out loud, because every word gets recognized. When I'm reading to myself, just reading without speaking the words aloud, there is a synthesis of the thoughts and ideas, and kind of words flow together. It's why we can read so quickly. But when something is read out loud, every word matters. And in the instance of Anne of Green Gables, I'm finding how much I am enjoying Lucy Maud Montgomery's language. It's brilliant and so much fun. So that's one form of speaking out loud, but I also encourage you to contemplate affirmations out loud. Perhaps contemplating it as positive self-talk, using present language, right? Like in the now, vibrant language that speaks to your heart. There's this beautiful book and method called Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod that I encourage you to check out if you haven't experienced it before. He teaches about creating rituals that take place the first hour of each morning. And you engage in 6 practices for 10 minutes each. And one is silence, so prayer, right? Connecting with source. The next is affirmations, which he writes his out ahead of time, which is always an option. I'm going to come back to that in just a second. Then he recommends visualization. So if you have a vision board or you go into your mind's eye, I'm trying to remember what they all are. Visualization, exercise, moving your body for 10 minutes. Reading some kind of inspiring material. And also writing, scribing, journaling for 10 minutes. It's a really lovely ritual. But I want to get back to the affirmation part of his Miracle Morning. When I do the Miracle Morning, what I love is speaking my affirmations out loud, like riffing on them, feeling the line of energy and then giving it a voice. So it might sound something like, today is a beautiful day, and I am so looking forward to my time here on planet Earth. I am affirming that miracles and light are coming to me now. I can feel the beauty of my body as it moves. I can feel the light coming to me now. And I affirm that today is going to be a beautiful day, and I am so looking forward to seeing the joy and the beauty and the light that the universe brings to me. And I affirm that this love is rippling out to everyone in the world that I love and everyone in the world who loves them until we reach a point where this love is circling around the planet. And I find that invitation to speak these affirmations out loud creates a sense of vibrancy in me that is more powerful than the mundane ramblings of my consciousness in that morning. So just some thoughts on using your throat chakra, using your voice to help energize you. And I recognize that you're getting ready to sleep, so this may not be the most opportune time to implement these strategies, but certainly it's something you can bring forward in the morning. So I invite you to take a deep breath in. And I'm realizing now I've been so happy to share all of this with you that I have not yet brought the angels in, but of course you know they're here, yes? We have been together long enough that you know the angels are here in everything that I do. But go ahead and take some breaths in, allowing your body to relax as you cozy on up and snuggle on in. Taking a deep breath in, letting your body know that it has permission to rest. You have done enough for today. And the angels are aware of what is in your heart and soul, and they will be working on your behalf as you sleep. So let me call the angels in. So beautiful angels on high, I ask that you join us here, and I acknowledge that you have been here since before the first breath. Angels, I ask that you bring forward a blanket of love and healing and service to each of our beloveds here with us right now. That you help to soothe their body, their consciousness, their energy field, helping them feel the wellspring of love and gratitude that is here for them right now. And dear ones, just take a beautiful breath in and out. And there is nothing you need to do in this moment. The angels are doing all the heavy lifting for you. We invite you to bring any prayers or intentions that are on your heart into the light. In this moment, you can say them silently, and your angels will hear you. What would you like to place into the light before you drift off? Let the angels know how they can support you. And just breathe it into the light. The angels say thank you for trusting us with your deepest prayers. We are here for you. We are here with you. We have loved you since before you drew your first breath on this planet. And there is nothing you will ever do that will keep us from loving you. There is nothing you have to do to earn or be worthy of this love. We love you because you are you, because you exist. So dear ones, just take a nice deep breath in, allowing this love to flow through you. Allowing this love to calm you. You are a blessing in this world. Truly you are. You carry within you love that will only exist through you. You are a beautiful presence, a beautiful portal of light. Just take a deep breath in. And whenever you feel ready to drift off, you are welcome to do so. This episode will run about an hour, so you have plenty of time. And while you rest, your angels will be with you. And I'm going to read you a story. And it probably will come as no surprise to you that we are returning to Anne of Green Gables because I am having a love affair right now with this book, especially as spoken word. Lucy Maud Montgomery's language is just a revelation. The words she uses, the images she conjures up as she describes each person and the scenes. And I love Anne. Anne is a girl after my own heart. She has big emotions, and she sees this world through such unique eyes. And I probably will skip some of the recap because I've been doing a lot of the recaps for you lately. But as you know, Anne was an orphan who has been adopted by Marilla and Matthew Cuthbert, who are brother and sister who own Green Gables, which is a farm. And Anne's best friend is Diana Barry. As we come into this next chapter, she and Diana had been estranged, not by their own desire, but because Anne had mistakenly gotten Diana drunk by giving her the wrong elixir out of a bottle of Marilla's wine instead of the cordial, which was what she was supposed to be drinking. And Diana's mother, Mrs. Barry, said, "You girls cannot see each other anymore," because she felt that Anne was a bad influence. But then Diana's baby sister, Minnie May, got the croup and all of the adults were out of town. And she came over to get Anne, and Anne knew exactly what to do. So she saved Minnie May's life, and Mrs. Barry then apologized to Anne for keeping the girls apart and invited Anne over as an honored guest of the family. And Anne is just delighted. So Anne and Diana have now been reunited. And that's where we pick up. This is chapter 19. A concert, a catastrophe, and a confession. "Marilla, can I go over to see Diana just for a minute?" asked Anne, running breathlessly down from the east gable one February evening. "I don't see what you want to be traipsing about after dark for," said Marilla shortly. "You and Diana walked home from school together, and then stood down there in the snow for half an hour more, your tongues going the whole blessed time, clickety-clack. So I don't think you're very badly off to see her again." "But she wants to see me," pleaded Anne. "She has something very important to tell me." "How do you know she has?" "Because she just signaled to me from her window. We have arranged a way to signal with our candles and cardboard. We set the candle on the windowsill and make flashes by passing the cardboard back and forth. So many flashes mean a certain thing. It was my idea, Marilla." "I'll warrant you it was," said Marilla emphatically. "And the next thing you'll be setting fire to the curtains with your signaling nonsense." "Oh, we're very careful, Marilla, and it's so interesting. 2 flashes mean, 'Are you there?' 3 means yes. And 4, no. 5 mean, 'Come over as soon as possible, because I have something important to reveal.' Diana has just signaled 5 flashes, and I'm really suffering to know what it is." "Well, you needn't suffer any longer," said Marilla sarcastically. "You can go, but you are to be back here in just 10 minutes. Remember that." Anne did remember it, and was back in the stipulated time, although probably no mortal will ever know just what it cost her to confine the discussion of Diana's important communication within the limits of 10 minutes. But at least she had made good use of them. "Oh, Marilla, what do you think? You know, tomorrow is Diana's birthday. Well, her mother told her she could ask me to come home with her from school and stay all night with her. And her cousins are coming over from Newbridge in a big pung sleigh to go to the debating club concert at the hall tomorrow night. And they are going to take Diana and me to the concert, if you'll let me go, that is. You will, won't you, Marilla? Oh, I feel so excited." "You can calm down then, because you're not going. You're better at home in your own bed. And as for that club concert, it's all nonsense, and little girls should not be allowed to go out to such places at all." "I'm sure the debating club is a most respectable affair," pleaded Anne. "I'm not saying it isn't, but you're not going to begin gadding about to the concerts and staying out all hours of the night. Pretty doings for children. I'm surprised at Mrs. Barry letting Diana go." "But it's such a very special occasion," mourned Anne on the verge of tears. Diana has only one birthday in a year. It isn't as if birthdays were common things, Marilla. Prissy Andrews is going to recite Curfew Must Not Ring Tonight. That is such a good moral piece, Marilla. I'm sure it would do me lots of good to hear it. And the choir are going to sing 4 lovely, pathetic songs that are pretty near as good as hymns. And oh, Marilla, the minister is going to take part. Yes, indeed he is. He's going to give an address. That will be just about the same thing as a sermon. Please, mayn't I go, Marilla? You heard what I said, Anne, didn't you? Take off your boots now and go to bed. It's past 8. There's just one more thing, Marilla, said Anne, with the air of producing the last shot in her locker. Mrs. Barry told Diana that we might sleep in the spare room bed. Think of the honor of your little Anne being put in the spare room bed. It's an honor you'll have to get along without. Go to bed, Anne, and don't let me hear another word out of you. When Anne, with tears rolling over her cheeks, had gone sorrowfully upstairs, Matthew, who had been apparently sound asleep on the lounge during the whole dialogue, opened his eyes and said decidedly, "Well now, Marilla, I think you ought to let Anne go." "I don't then," retorted Marilla. "Who's bringing this child up, Matthew? You or me?" "Well, now you," admitted Matthew. "Don't interfere then." "Well now, I ain't interfering. It ain't interfering to have your own opinion, and my opinion is that you ought to let Anne go." "You'd think I ought to let Anne go to the moon if she took the notion, I have no doubt," was Marilla's amiable rejoinder. "I might have let her spend the night with Diana if that was all, but I don't approve of this concert plan. She'd go there and catch a cold as like not and have her head filled up with nonsense and excitement. It would unsettle her for a week. I understand that child's disposition and what's good for it better than you, Matthew." "I think you ought to let Anne go," repeated Matthew firmly. Argument was not his strong point, but holding fast to his opinion certainly was. Marilla gave a gasp of helplessness and took refuge in silence. The next morning, when Anne was washing the breakfast dishes in the pantry, Matthew paused on his way out to the barn to say to Marilla again, "I think you ought to let Anne go, Marilla." For a moment, Marilla looked things not lawful to be uttered, but then she yielded to the inevitable and said tartly, "Very well, she can go, since nothing else will please you." Anne flew out of the pantry, dripping, dishcloth in hand. "Oh, Marilla, Marilla, say those blessed words again." "I guess once is enough to say them. This is Matthew's doing, and I wash my hands of it. If you catch pneumonia sleeping in a strange bed or coming out of that hot hall in the middle of the night, don't blame me, blame Matthew. And surely you're dripping greasy water all over the floor. I never saw such a careless child." "Oh, I know I'm a great trial to you, Marilla," said Anne repentantly. "I make so many mistakes, but then just think of all the mistakes I don't make, although I might. I'll get some sand and scrub up the spots before I go to school. Oh, Marilla, my heart was just so set on going to that concert. I never was to a concert in my life, and when the other girls talk about them in school, I feel so out of it. You didn't know just how I felt about it, but you see, Matthew did. Matthew understands me, and it is so nice to be understood, Marilla." Anne was too excited to do herself justice as to the lessons that morning in school. Gilbert Blythe spelled her down in class and left her clear out of sight in mental arithmetic. Anne's consequent humiliation was less than it might have been, however, in view of the concert and the spare room bed. She and Diana talked so constantly about it all day that with a stricter teacher than Mr. Phillips, dire disgrace must inevitably have been their portion. Anne felt that she could not have borne it if she had not been able to go to the concert, for nothing else was discussed that day in school. The Avonlea Debating Club, which met fortnightly all winter, had had several smaller free entertainments. But this was to be a big affair, admission 10 cents, in aid of the library. The Avonlea young people had been practicing for weeks, and all the scholars were especially interested in it by reason of older brothers and sisters who were going to take part. Everybody in school over 9 years of age expected to go, except Carrie Sloane, whose father shared Marilla's opinions about small girls going out to night concerts. Carrie Sloane cried into her grammar all the afternoon. For Anne, the real excitement began with the dismissal of school and increased therefrom in crescendo until it reached to a crash of positive ecstasy in the concert itself. They had a perfectly elegant tea, and then came the delicious occupation of dressing in Diana's little room upstairs. Diana did Anne's front hair in the new pompadour style, and Anne tied Diana's bows with the especial knack that she possessed, and they experimented with at least a half a dozen different ways of arranging their back hair. At last they were ready, cheeks scarlet and eyes glowing with excitement. True, Anne could not help a little pang when she contrasted her plain black tam and shapeless tight-sleeved homemade gray cloth coat with Diana's jaunty fur cap and smart little jacket. But she remembered in time that she had an imagination and could use it. Then Diana's cousins, the Murrays from Newbridge, came. They all crowded into the big pung sleigh among straw and furry robes. Anne reveled in the drive to the hall, slipping along over the satin-smooth roads with the snow crisping under the runners. There was a magnificent sunset, and the snowy hills and deep blue water of the St. Lawrence Gulf seemed to rim in the splendor like a huge bowl of pearl and sapphire brimmed with wine and fire. Tinkles of sleigh bells and distant laughter that seemed like the mirth of wood elves came from every quarter. "Oh, Diana," breathed Anne, squeezing Diana's mittened hand under the fur robe. "Isn't it all like a beautiful dream? Do I really look the same as usual? I feel so different that it seems to me that it must show in my looks." "You look awfully nice," said Diana, who, having just received a compliment from one of her cousins, felt that she ought to pass it on. "You've got the loveliest color." The program that night was a series of thrills for at least one listener in the audience, and as Anne assured Diana, every succeeding thrill was a thrillier than the last. When Prissy Andrews, attired in a new pink silk waist with a string of pearls around her smooth white throat and real carnations in her hair, rumor whispered that the master had sent all the way to town for them for her, climbed the slimy ladder, dark without one ray of light. Anne shivered in luxurious sympathy. When the choir sang far above the gentle daisies, Anne gazed at the ceiling as if it were frescoed with angels. When Sam Sloane proceeded to explain and illustrate how Sockery set a hen, Anne laughed until people sitting near her laughed too, more out of sympathy with her than with amusement, at a selection that was rather threadbare even in Avonlea. And when Mr. Phillips gave Mark Antony's oration over the dead body of Caesar in the most heart-stirring tones, looking at Prissy Andrews at the very end of every sentence. Anne felt that she could rise in mutiny on the spot if but one Roman citizen led the way. Only one number on the program failed to interest her. When Gilbert Blythe recited Bingen on the Rhine, Anne picked up Rhoda Murray's library book and read it until he had finished. When she sat rigidly stiff and motionless while Diana clapped her hands until they were tingling. It was 11 when they got home, sated with dissipation, but with the exceeding sweet pleasure of talking it all over still to come. Everyone seemed asleep and the house was dark and silent. Anne and Diana tiptoed into the parlor, a long narrow room, out of which the spare room opened. It was pleasantly warm and dimly lighted by the embers of a fire in the grate. "Let's undress here," said Diana. "It's so nice and warm." "Hasn't it been a delightful time?" sighed Anne rapturously. "It must be splendid to get up and recite there. Do you suppose we'll ever be asked to do it, Diana?" "Yes, of course, someday. They're always wanting the big scholars to recite. Gilbert Blythe does often, and he's only 2 years older than us. Oh, Anne, how could you pretend not to listen to him when he came to the line, 'There's another, not a sister'? He looked right down at you." "Diana," said Anne with dignity, "you are my bosom friend, but I cannot allow even you to speak to me of that person. Are you ready for bed? Let's run a race and see who gets to the bed first." The suggestion appealed to Diana. The 2 little white-clad figures flew down the long room, through the spare room door, and bounded on the bed at the same moment. And then something moved beneath them. There was a gasp and a cry, and somebody said in muffled accents, "Merciful goodness." Anne and Diana were never able to tell just how they got off that bed and out of the room. They only knew that after one frantic rush they found themselves tiptoeing shiveringly upstairs. "Oh, who was it? What was it?" whispered Anne, her teeth chattering with cold and fright. "It was Aunt Josephine," said Diana, gasping with laughter. "Oh, Anne, it was Aunt Josephine. However she came to be there. Oh, and I know she will be furious. It's dreadful. It's really dreadful. Did you ever know anything so funny, Anne?" "Who is your Aunt Josephine?" "She's Father's aunt, and she lives in Charlottetown. She's awfully old, 70 anyhow, and I don't believe she was ever a little girl. We were expecting her out for a visit, but not so soon. She's awfully prim and proper, and she'll scold dreadfully about this, I know. Well, we'll have to sleep with Minnie May, and you can't think of how she kicks." Miss Josephine Barry did not appear at the early breakfast the next morning. Mrs. Barry smiled kindly at the 2 little girls. "Did you have a good time last night? I tried to stay awake until you came home, for I wanted to tell you that Aunt Josephine had come and that you would have to go upstairs after all, but I was so tired I fell asleep. I hope you didn't disturb your aunt, Diana." Diana preserved a discreet silence, but she and Anne exchanged furtive smiles of guilty amusement across the table. Anne hurried home after breakfast and so remained in blissful ignorance of the disturbance which presently resulted in the Barry household until the late afternoon, when she went down to Mrs. Lynde's on an errand for Marilla. "So you and Diana nearly frightened poor old Miss Barry to death last night?" said Mrs. Lynde severely, but with a twinkle in her eye. Mrs. Barry was here a few minutes ago on her way to Carmody. She's feeling real worried about it. Old Miss Barry was in a terrible temper when she got up this morning, and Josephine Barry's temper is no joke. I can tell you that. She wouldn't speak to Diana at all. It wasn't Diana's fault, said Anne contritely. It was mine. I suggested racing to see who would get in bed first. I knew it, said Mrs. Lynde with the exultation of a correct guesser. I knew that idea came out of your head. Well, it's made a nice lot of trouble, that's what. Old Miss Barry came out to stay for a month, but she declares she won't stay another day and is going right back to town tomorrow, Sunday, and all as it is. She'd have gone today if they could have taken her. She had promised to pay for a quarter's music lessons for Diana, but now she is determined to do nothing at all for such a tomboy. Oh, I guess they had a lively time of it here this morning. The Barrys must feel cut up. Old Miss Barry is rich, and they'd like to keep on the good side of her. Of course, Mrs. Barry didn't say just that to me, but I'm a pretty good judge of human nature, that's what. I'm such an unlucky girl, mourned Anne. I'm always getting into scrapes myself and getting my best friends, people I'd shed my heart's blood for, into them too. Can you tell me why it is so, Mrs. Lynde? It's because you're too heedless and impulsive, child, that's what. You never stop to think. Whatever comes into your head to say or do, you say or do it without a moment's reflection. Oh, but that's the best of it, protested Anne. Something just flashes into your mind, so exciting, and you must out with it. If you stop to think it over, spoil it all. Haven't you ever felt that yourself, Mrs. Lynde? No, Mrs. Lynde had not. She shook her head sagely. You must learn to think a little, Anne, that's what. The proverb you need to go by is look before you leap, especially in the spare room beds. Mrs. Lynde laughed comfortably over her mild joke, but Anne remained pensive. She saw nothing to laugh at the situation, which to her eyes appeared very serious. When she left Mrs. Lynde's, she took her way across the crusted fields to Orchard Slope. Diana met her at the kitchen door. Your Aunt Josephine was very cross about it, wasn't she? Whispered Anne. Yes, answered Diana, stifling a giggle with an apprehensive glance over her shoulder at the closed sitting room door. She was fairly dancing with rage, Anne. Oh, how she scolded. She said I was the worst behaved girl she ever saw, and that my parents ought to be ashamed of the way they had brought me up. She says she won't stay, and I'm sure I don't care, but Father and Mother do. Why didn't you tell them it was my fault? Demanded Anne. It's likely I'd do such a thing, isn't it? Said Diana with just scorn. I'm no telltale, Anne Shirley, and anyhow, I was just as much to blame as you. Well, I'm going to go in and tell her myself, said Anne resolutely. Diana stared. Anne Shirley, you'd never. Why, she'll eat you alive. Don't frighten me any more than I am frightened, implored Anne. I'd rather walk up to a cannon's mouth, but I've got to do it, Diana. It was my fault, and I've got to confess. I've had practice in confessing, fortunately. Well, she's in the room, said Diana. You can go in if you want to. I wouldn't dare, and I don't believe you'll do a bit of good. With this encouragement, Anne bearded the lion in its den. That is to say, walked resolutely up to the sitting room door and knocked faintly. A sharp "Come in" followed. Miss Josephine Barry, thin, prim, and rigid, was knitting fiercely by the fire, her wrath quite unappeased, and her eyes snapping through her gold-rimmed glasses. She wheeled around in her chair, expecting to see Diana, and beheld a white-faced girl whose great eyes were brimmed up with a mixture of desperate courage and shrinking terror. "Who are you?" demanded Miss Josephine Barry without ceremony. "I'm Anne of Green Gables," said the small visitor, tremulously clasping her hands with her characteristic gesture, "and I've come to confess, if you please." "Confess what?" "That it was all my fault about jumping into bed on you last night. I suggested it. Diana would have never thought of such a thing. Diana's a very ladylike girl, Mrs. Barry, so you must see how unjust it is to blame her." "Oh, I must, hey? I rather think Diana did her share of jumping at least. Such carryings-on in a respectable house." "But we were only in fun," persisted Anne. "I think you ought to forgive us, Miss Barry, now that we've apologized. And anyhow, please forgive Diana and let her have her music lessons. Diana's heart is set on her music lessons, Miss Barry, and I know too well what it is to set your heart on such a thing and not get it. If you must be cross with anyone, be cross with me. I have been so used in my early days to having people cross at me that I can endure it much better than Diana can." Much of the snap had gone out of the old lady's eyes by this time and was replaced by a twinkle of amused interest. But she still said severely, "I don't think it is any excuse for you that you were only in fun. Little girls were never indulged in that kind of fun when I was young. You don't know what it is to be awakened out of a sound sleep after a long and arduous journey by two great girls coming bounce down on you." "I don't know, but I can imagine," said Anne eagerly. "I am sure it must have been very disturbing. But then, there's our side of it, too. Have you any imagination, Miss Barry? If you have, just put yourself in our place. We didn't know there was anybody in that bed, and you nearly scared us to death. It was simply awful the way we felt. And then we couldn't sleep in the spare room after being promised. I suppose you are used to sleeping in spare rooms, but just imagine what you would feel like if you were a little orphan girl who had never had such an honor." All the snap had gone by this time. Miss Barry actually laughed, a sound which caused Diana, waiting in speechless anxiety in the kitchen outside, to give a great gasp of relief. "I am afraid my imagination is a little rusty. It's been so long since I used it," she said. "I dare say your claim to sympathy is just as strong as mine. It all depends on the way we look at it. Sit down here and tell me about yourself." "I'm very sorry I can't," said Anne firmly. "I would like to because you seem like an interesting lady, and you might even be a kindred spirit, although you don't look very much like it. But it's my duty to go home to Miss Marilla Cuthbert. Miss Marilla Cuthbert is a very kind lady who has taken me to bring up properly. She's doing her best, but it is very discouraging work. You must not blame her because I jumped on the bed. But before I go, I do wish you would tell me if you will forgive Diana and stay just as long as you meant to in Avonlea." "I think perhaps I will if you will come over and talk to me occasionally," said Miss Barry. That evening, Miss Barry gave Diana a silver bangle bracelet and told the senior members of the household that she had unpacked her valise. "I've made up my mind to stay simply for the sake of getting better acquainted with that Anne girl," she said frankly. "She amuses me, and at my time of life an amusing person is a rarity." Marilla's only comment when she heard the story was, "I told you so." This was for Matthew's benefit. Miss Barry stayed her month out and over. She was a more agreeable guest than usual, for Anne kept her in good humor, and they became firm friends. When Miss Barry went away, she said, "Remember, you Anne girl, when you come to town, You're to visit me, and I'll put you in my very sparest spare room bed to sleep. Miss Barry was a kindred spirit after all, Anne confided to Marilla. You wouldn't think so to look at her, but she is. You don't find it right out at first, as in Matthew's case, but after a while you come to see it. Kindred spirits are not so scarce as I used to think. It's splendid to find out there are so many of them in the world. Isn't that just a sweet chapter? And Anne and Miss Barry's friendship continues to grow in the book. I love Anne. I love how big her heart is. I love how deeply she feels. I love her courageousness in speaking what is on her heart. And so I thank you for allowing me to share this with you. Perhaps you have already drifted off. And if you haven't and you'd like more company, there are many more episodes in the archive, so you can queue another one up and we can continue to keep you company. But for now, beloved friend, I say to you, sweet dreams. I wish you a good rest. I wish you blessings of light and magic. Thank you so much for being here with me, and we'll talk again soon. I love you. Good night.